Welcome to One on One. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper, and today we have, I think, a real celebrity here in our midst. A guy who's an Ocean City guy, but he's not really. He's deep down secretly a Del Mar guy, which we'll talk about a little bit. But we all know that my love for radio goes back to when I was just a kid and loved radio, loved disc jockeys. Big part of my life, and I think a lot of other people's lives here on the Lower Shore. We have Wayne Cannon. Welcome, Wayne.
Good to see you.
You too.
Great to be here.
Give me some of that disc jockey talk. How do you do the disc jockey talk?
Oh, I don't do that anymore, but you know, it's every once in a while I get carried away and do that disc jockey thing. So
now you were an FM guy for a long time up in Bethany Beach at WWTR.
Yeah.
When I was in high school.
AM and FM.
AM and FM.
My first gig was WETT 1590 in Ocean City. That lasted, when I first joined there, it lasted 3 months because the station closed down.
That's right.
Jack Gillen was on the announcing staff at that time. So then I went to WWTR in Bethany Beach, spent many good years there. Steve Stone did the morning show, Jack Renault 9 to 12.
Yeah.
And I was Captain Midnight from midnight to 6 o'clock, and it was a great shift because at the beach, you know, normally in radio you have two drive times, morning and afternoon. At the beach, after the bars close.
Right.
That's another drive time. So that's who my audience was.
Right. So like my senior year of high school, freshman year of college, sophomore year, you were what we listened to at night. I mean, we took you home with us after the bars closed, just like you said.
And we didn't have a lot of radio stations at that time, and WWTR was a neat radio station playing some good music, and they gave me freedom. I didn't have, you know, today in radio, you have a playlist, and you do. I did anything I wanted. I had freedom. You know, when John Lennon died, I remember I was right there, and the calls coming in from all over, and we played Beatles music for 6 hours straight, didn't repeat one. But people were calling in, crying sometimes, telling me what John Lennon meant to them. Same way when Elvis died or whatever. So anyway, I had what a radio announcer always wanted, freedom. And,
and back then there were basically the three stations. It was WSEA in Georgetown.
I left there. I was morning for many years at WSEA in Georgetown. Loved that. Yeah. You know, loved that. And then I was back to WET. I went to WETT a couple of times. After WWTR, though, it was Stu Franco came in from Baltimore, and to me, he was one of the great broadcasters, and he started 96 Rock. So WWTR in the early 80s became 96 Rock.
Right.
So I was with WETT 96 Rock. With 96 Rock, I was sales and promotions, and that, to me, was when radio really started clicking in this area here. We had billboards all around the area, 96 Rock. We had 96 Rock shops on the boardwalk. And it was a great radio station, and it was the folks that helped put that together did 96 Rock in Atlanta, 98 Rock in Baltimore, DC 101 in Washington, Burkhart Abrams. They were our consultants, and that was a big deal. So.
Right.
And then I spent 20 years at 92.7 WGMD. I was their afternoon talk show host, and then did some sales or whatever. So that was one of the neat things I did. I was always on the air, but I did some sales also. So.
Right. Now, here in Salisbury, the big radio stations were WBOC had an AM and FM radio station, which no one remembers.
Yeah.
And WJDY.
Yep. Well, when I was a kid growing up, WJDY, 1470 on your radio dial. You know, every person, as you mentioned before.
Can you tell I love it when he does the radio thing? I love that. Go ahead, sorry.
Everybody has their favorite radio guy or gal in the morning. Mine was Johnny Williams. When I was a kid growing up in Del Mar, I went to Del Mar Elementary School, Del Mar High School, getting ready for school. It was Johnny Williams.
Johnny Williams in the morning.
Great voice. You know, and I finally had a chance to meet him, Johnny Williams Pasota. And of course, at that time, WJDY was our WCAO in Baltimore type station. You know, Johnny Dark was doing his thing in Baltimore. We had Johnny Williams here. And then we had, I still remember, of course, RT.
Right.
Roland Twig. I mean, you know, when I put this thing out on different groups on Facebook. You know, I was thinking about starting a Hall of Fame. Bang! People started, you know, all these names. You know, and RT was right up there because RT at 1470 WJDY had all these neat sayings. You know, check her up before you wreck her up, and you know, how you doing?
Yeah.
You know, he was great. So WJDY had all these neat announcers. You know, Jerry Skizlak at one time.
Yeah.
And then we had in Salisbury Wyco.
Yeah.
You know, that was a country station.
Mr. Phillips in the morning.
Bill Phillips, and he
Party
had
Line.
Party Line,
Yeah.
and that was one of the longest running market shows on Delmarva.
Yeah.
Bill Phillips was, and he should be in the Hall of Fame first ballot.
Right.
And then 960 WBOC. Of course, at that time, a lot of TV and radio stations were partners. 960 WBOC originated out of the WBOC Radio TV Park, and some of the great announcers they had there. You know, little Georgie Hack, he was
Right.
there. He also did TV.
Ralph
Pennywell.
Ralph Pennywell was the guy.
Ralph was so cool. I used
Yeah.
to listen to him, and you know, he was so cool. Chris Thomas was the sports guy there at one
Chris.
time. Chris later on went to
Television.
WBAO in Baltimore.
Yeah.
But he was a great, you know, he did the sports on WBOC TV.
Yeah.
He would come in with Pennywell in the afternoons and do sports, but he was so funny, and he was
Yeah.
good. I remember
He was
one time.
sarcastic, and Ralph is so straight.
Yeah, right.
And
They
Chris
were-
would go all over the place.
Yeah, I remember one time I was listening, and yeah, you're right. I mean, Ralph was like cool, you know.
Yeah.
And Chris Thompson. I remember once we had a NASCAR race in Dover, and of course Richard Petty was there, and Richard Petty got stopped by the Dover police for speeding. and I remember what Chris Thomas says. Chris says, "Now, can you imagine this, Ralph? You know, the policeman goes up there and says, 'Hey, guy, who do you think you are, Richard Petty?' 'Yes, I am. Yes, I am.' You know, so." But that was a good team there, and you know they had a lot of good announcers there on the AM 960 and also on TV. So.
Yeah. Chris's claim to fame was when he was on TV.
Yeah.
There was a big lottery drawing for like 10 million.
Yeah.
And they read the numbers on the set because it was a big deal, and he acted like he had won. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that. So.
If you Google it, you can watch the
Yeah.
video of it. It's hysterical.
Yeah, well, he was a great broadcaster. So I think, you know, with this Hall of Fame, we're looking for the pioneers, first of all.
Yeah.
And the reason we're doing this Hall of Fame, it's called the Radio and TV, Delmarva Radio and TV Broadcasters Hall of Fame. We want to acknowledge the men and women in broadcasting who informed us, educated us, and entertained us. And, you know, this is the time to do it. We don't want to lose track of all these wonderful people.
Yeah.
You know, and when I put this out on the different groups, people just...
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, the disc jockeys have touched all of our lives. They really have.
Yeah. He was a guy, and it was mostly he at that time.
Yeah.
Ladies came on later. You know,
Well, I
we had
remember
the-
Stevie Michaels,
Stevie Michaels, you know, was just-
WKHI, who
did-
became Stevie Prettyman.
Yeah, she did a tremendous. She was one of the first, and Sandy Alexander.
Sandy was on for
Yeah,
100 years.
and she's
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's
From
just
an Ocean
amazing.
City girl.
Yeah,
Saka
yeah.
family, yeah.
But you know, the technology wasn't as great as it is then. I remember covering hurricanes in Ocean City, and we didn't have the Weather Channel.
Right.
We didn't have all these neat things. We couldn't go to the laptop and, okay, let's check this out. It was, you know, we got the NORAD or whatever
Right.
it was deal.
It was all numbers.
NOAA.
Yeah.
And you know, these radio things that we had to listen to. But, you know, it was a lot of fun, you know. So.
Yeah. So the Hall of Fame, is there a timeline for this, or
Well,
can
you
we
know,
start a campaign to get
after
names?
40 years in broadcasting, I retired. Now I'm still doing some things for WGMD. I do a weekly thing called Getting Ready for the Weekend, and I do some news.
Right.
You know, which is neat now. You know, I sit in my home in West Ocean City, write it, record it, send it to the newsroom. It's on the air. But I decided after, you know, I got some time now, so I decided that this is what I want to do. And I want other people to help me. So I've had feelers out to other broadcasters around that I worked with through the years. Hey, I need some help here. I need some help from a Jim, one of my friends I used to work with in radio, to help me with the Northern Delaware people, because I don't know a lot of those folks
Right.
there.
Right.
You know, Joe Pine, he was one of the first bad guys in broadcast on TV. I don't know if you remember him.
No.
Or not. But Joe Pine started in Wilmington at the English Grill. He had a radio show called It's Your Nickel. But he was very well known in TV at one time. But they had some great announcers there. I've got a guy that's helped me over in the mid shore, and I've got a guy help. Hopefully, we got to do something in Virginia. So you know, that's it's going to take a time. I want to do it right. I've made some phone calls. Hey, can you help me out? So, you know, and I'm looking at, you know, and I think that on the first ballot, I'm just looking at the pioneer, you know, John B. Greenberger.
Oh, wow.
You know, when he signed
Tom
on,
McGuire.
Tom McGuire.
Yeah.
John B. Greenberg, I think, should be on the first ballot, and I think maybe later on the award should be called the Greenberger. Hey, I won the Greenberger.
Yeah.
I mean, it was his voice and his image that we first heard and saw when BOC first signed on, WBOC first signed on in 1954. He was our Walter Cronkite.
Yeah.
He was the man we trusted, and he was at WBOC for years. So, you know, we got to take care of the pioneers first.
Right.
And he's one of them. And Tom McGuire, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, all these great voices.
Yeah, I mean, Tom McGuire and Johnny Williams, when I was a kid, they could make you feel better about your day.
Exactly.
I mean, you'd hear them in the morning and you would go, let's go get them. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, Johnny had this, Williams had this this demeanor. I mean, as a young kid, 8, 9, he made me feel comfortable.
Right.
You know, and when I remember when I first met him, I'm like any other guy. You know, you wonder, hey, what's this guy look like? And but I remember when I first met him. You know, it was sort of neat. So.
Yeah, I always loved the personalities when the shifts would change. I mean, you always had sort of the wacky morning person, and then you'd have someone more subdued come in at 10 o'clock.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah. And then you had like your Ralph Pennywells in the afternoon.
Yeah, and he was more subdued, but there was a little bit of, you never really knew where Ralph was going to go. Yeah. And then you had wacky people at night again.
Right.
So it was a weird. I mean, all the stations had their own sort of. The personalities and the character was really cool.
Oh yeah.
Jim King. I used to love Jim King in the afternoon at WJDY.
He had such a great voice. I mean, to me, listening to Jim King on WJDY, he was like listening to a Baltimore or Washington guy or whatever. So, you know, that was interesting. So, you know, back to WETT in Ocean City years ago, and you grew up in Ocean City. And years ago, I worked there with Jack Gillen, my first show, and in the SOP, you know, we'd take a look. We used to let the firemen know in Ocean City where the fires were. Let me tell you how laid back that was. So, folks, listen to this.
Well, you had a great alert theme. I remember that. Like there would be a song playing, and all of a sudden it's like a do 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 do.
Exactly.
And everybody would stop what they were doing because there's a fire somewhere.
People don't realize this, but in Ocean City, you didn't have all the radios and the farm. So we would find out that there was a fire through a siren or whatever. We would call the firehouse, and they say, there's a fire at 4th Street in the boardwalk. Wayne, you know, so we there's a fire, and all the firemen would be listening.
Right, exactly.
This is the WETT fire alert. There's a fire right now, a house fire at 4th and Baltimore Avenue. This is, I mean, you talk about, and when I went to WETT in the SOP, they said, now this is true.
Yeah.
They said, here's how you find out if there's a fire. And she said, this is Gina Grazier.
Right.
Gina, they owned the radio
greats.
station.
Yeah.
And they lived at a mobile home right on the grounds.
Right behind the station.
And in the SOP it says, if you hear the dogs barking, most likely it could be a fire whistle. I mean, how laid back, how, you know, is that, huh? So that's what we did at WETT. And a lot of the fishermen coming in from the ocean used to key in on our signal.
We did. We had a device. If the compass failed or there was some issue,
you
could get the station because it went a long way out in the ocean.
Right.
And there was like a lever on the top of the thing, and it would turn it to point to the direction of the station, and that's how we knew where Ocean City was. And you'd follow that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, WETT, that was something else. It's no longer there. It was 1590. It was the only radio station in Ocean City for a while.
For a long time. And that was, I remember your last gig there. You were on in the mornings, and you became known as the mayor of West Ocean City.
The mayor of West Ocean City, yeah.
And that's what's fascinating with me because, you know, being in the news business, I don't really get involved in the community the way that you have. You've been a Chamber of Commerce president. You've helped lead a lot of things in your community, and you used your radio ability and ties to do that. Talk about that a little bit, how you have given back to the community.
A lot of guys in radio when they start out, and you know, I mean, I'm living a dream. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a radio announcer. So, but a lot of guys, they want to go to the next level. You know, they want to go here. I wanted to dig in my neighborhood and be a good radio announcer where I was, get involved with the community. And I was president of the Chamber of Commerce on the Tourism Commission and, you know, Lions Club and all that stuff. MC'd a lot of events, you know, the Berlin Christmas Parade and the Easter Parade in Ocean City. And that was a big deal for me to be right in Ocean City, and that's where I grew. And I went to different radio stations, but I would always let promote the town of Ocean City and everything like that. Get the mayor on. I think Mayor Mathias, well, he's now the Senator Mathias. I think he cut his teeth on my morning radio show.
Right.
That's Rick Meehan, who's the mayor now. I think the first time they ever went on a broadcast was on my morning radio show.
And Jim Mathias, you get him talking at 7 a.m., suddenly it's noon.
That's right. I mean, it's like you ask one question, you can just walk around, drink coffee, So I'll tell you one quick story about WETT. I've never told this in public before.
Uh-oh.
I'm doing the radio show, and I get a call from Christy, my wife. We had a wood stove at that time. I used to live on Bonita Drive, close by the radio station. And anyway, so she called me up and she said, Wayne, I forgot to put some wood in the wood stove. I said, I'm on the air. And she said, but the kids are going to come home, it's going to be cold and this and that. I said, okay. So it's about 8:10 or something like that. I said, hey, it's 8:10 right here on WETT Radio. We got a lot of neat things, news coming up at 8:30. And right now, here's Don McLean.
American Pie.
And American Pie. Bob, okay, he's singing. I jump in the car. This is a true story. I jump in the car. I live about a mile and a half away.
Yeah.
Go to Bonita Drive in Ocean City, get the wood in the wood stove, fix that all up, and get back to the radio station. And he's still singing. And yeah, Don McLean. Yeah, probably broke. I don't know how many laws there, but it was interesting, and we had a warm house.
Now, when I was a kid, when I was in high school, I used to hang around up at WSUX in Seaford, 98.3.
I can't remember, but WSUX was in Seaford.
Right.
That was when I got out of broadcasting school. That's one of the first stations I went to see if I get a job. Yeah.
And they would put the long version of Freebird on when they had to go to the bathroom. That was like 9 or 11 minutes.
All radio announcers know those long. If you hear Freebird, all these neat songs. Sweet Judy Blue Eyes was one.
Yeah.
So.
And the coolest thing when I worked there, the greatest honor, which it was one of those things that they didn't see as an honor, but I got to go a couple times to the airport to pick up the American Top 40 with Casey Kasem records.
Yeah.
And they came on LPs.
LPs, yeah.
And I would drive those back to Seaford to the station. And I think they ran it like on Sunday morning or Saturday morning. I forget when it was. But I used to used to time it, and I'd walk right out to the nose of the airplane, and they had like fresh fruit and like really perishables and important stuff in the nose of this little commuter airplane, and I would get these records and drive them in the car. And I remember feeling so important because if I was in an accident, the teenagers of Delmarva would not know what the number one song was this week.
Oh, I know. That was great. Yeah, everything was on a record and everything. Now it's all digital.
And it came from Hollywood. The address was from Hollywood.
Oh, I
know.
Like,
wow, I'm carrying something from Hollywood.
Yeah, I know. That was a big deal. So, and then we're talking about the radio stations. Every town, Salisbury had 3 or so, but Seaford, WSUX, Georgetown, WJWL.
Right.
And I think talking about the Hall of Fame, I think some of those people that started that, Herb and Faye Scott's Great Scott Broadcasting.
Right.
I think they should be considered for like the first ballot of the Hall of Fame. Bob Smith, first employee of WWTR, I'm sorry, WGMD.
Right.
He was the morning guy. He was another guy I used to listen to. Bob Smith, WJWL in Georgetown. Ed Marzoa, I think he was station manager at the time. So every little town had their radio station. Salisbury was good enough to have 3. The first station in Salisbury was 1928. It was housed in the Wycomico Hotel.
Right.
And owned by the Truitt cousins or whatever.
Yeah.
And one of the things there, it only lasted a short time because it lacked of advertising revenue. But Fay Ray was making a film in Easton, and then she came and she was a guest on the show or whatever.
Wow.
She was very nervous. One of the Troy said she was very nervous at that time. So, but anyway, that was before she did King Kong. But she was a well-known actress, and it was a silent film. So,
right.
And Amelia Earhart also made a trip to Salisbury in '28, but I'm still researching that. I don't know if she was on that radio show or not.
Right.
But speaking about radio at that time, in 1928, we didn't have a lot of radio stations in the nation, and you could pick up the radio station. I think it was WSMD, Salisbury, Maryland,
right.
And you could pick that up all around the country.
Wow.
Because we didn't have a lot of radio stations. and they used to broadcast. One of the things they used to broadcast was one of the downtown theaters in Salisbury. They used to broadcast the vaudeville shows and stuff like
wow.
that. So, but he only lasted a very short time because the lack of advertising revenue. So
right now, history's big with you, and you have a couple Facebook pages with Eastern Shore history and Ocean City
right.
history, and you've done some research on when John Kennedy visited, which we covered in the Independent, Salisbury Independent, a couple times. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. And it was, I can still remember in elementary school the Weekly Reader.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
I first heard of John Kennedy in the Weekly Reader when I was at Delmar Elementary School, and I remember looking at his face or whatever, and along with the other candidates, and I thought, this guy looks like I heard him on TV or whatever. But anyway, Kennedy did come from Salisbury to Salisbury. He came to the Eastern Shore 2 times. He came in 1959, in May of '59. He landed at Salisbury Airport, and then he went to Ocean City to speak before the Maryland Municipal League at the Atlantic Hotel. I researched that as I was researching him being at Johnny's and Sammy's. And I've got the actual speech that he delivered
wow.
at the Atlantic Hotel. So, but anyway, in Ocean City, he was running for president. He won. And he was running for president, and it was May 14th, 1960. He had a hectic schedule that day. It started off in Havre de Grace at 8:30. He spoke before he went to the Democratic headquarters, shaking hands, hey, thanks for working with me and everything. At 8:30, the mayor, McElhenney, I think it was his name, gave him the key to the city. He said, here's the key to the city, to Havre de Grace, and hopefully to the White House. There were about 300, 400 people on the scene there. Joe Tidings, who was state senator at that time, state delegate at that time, later become a United States senator
right.
at the urging of Kennedy,
right.
was there. First time he ever met Kennedy, and they really hit it off pretty well. So anyway, it started in Havre de Grace, this motorcade. And you talk about a schedule. It went from Havre de Grace to Elkton to Centerville. They were in a convertible given to them by a Harford County car dealer, probably a Democrat. Centerville, then they went to Easton, and then Kennedy was in excruciating pain at that time. We had a back problem,
back issues,
as we all know, Addison's disease and some other things. They had to lay over. He had to rest in Cambridge for 2 hours
wow.
before coming to Salisbury. And while, according to Tidings and what I read, even though he was in Cambridge resting, he was still on the phone making phone calls, okay, checking this, checking that, or whatever. He was a star. I mean, all of a sudden, he was the star of the campaign. Just a week before, he won the West Virginia primary. The Maryland primary, this was the 14th, he was in Salisbury. The Maryland primary was going to be on the 17th. All right, so they get back in the car in Cambridge, and they come to Salisbury. And he spoke at Johnny's and Sammy's. I got a picture of him at Johnny's and
right.
Sammy's. And he met the ladies there, and I got a copy of the speech that he spoke there.
Wow.
That he delivered there, and which is going to be part of the little thing I'm putting together with Salisbury Independent, and then the Caroline, his plane, the Caroline, which we all know, which was named after Caroline Kennedy, had been flown in, and it was waiting for him at the Salisbury Airport.
Okay.
But after the Johnny's and Sammy's, or it may have been right before, I don't know, he took a motorcade tour in downtown Salisbury.
Right.
And I still remember, to this day, looking at the Salisbury Times the next day,
right.
on the 15th or whatever, of Kennedy waving in front of Hess Apparel. I'm trying to find that picture.
Right.
I'm hoping the NAB folks will have it or
right.
whatever. But I still remember that. So he did come to Salisbury, and then he went to the motorcade, went to Salisbury Airport. He got on the Caroline, then flew to Baltimore for more speeches and stuff. So that was a hectic day. So he came to this area 2 times in 1960, and he won because of Tidings really did some good stuff. Tidings was well known, the Tidings name. He did win the Maryland primary by 73%. So he won Maryland, and then he won the White House. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And there's so much interest in this history stuff on those Facebook pages, and that helped drive me to have a history page every week in my newspaper.
Right. It's amazing. It's so easy to be a historian nowadays. Yeah. You can go to Google and say, okay, Kennedy trip to Salisbury.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. All this
stuff
comes out.
Go to the library and look it all up. Yeah.
I mean, I found the Johnny and Sammy speech by going to Kennedy Library or whatever.
Wow.
And I did, May 14th, 1960, boom, 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 there he was.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. So, I did a little thing on Facebook about Annie Oakley. She used to live in Cambridge in the early 20s. I mean, she was, to me, the first megastar. Well, I mean, they didn't use the term superstar at that time.
Right.
But she was the first lady superstar. She was very, she Wild Bill, Wild West show. She, traveled to Europe, before the Queen, and she settled in Cambridge for maybe 2 or 3 years. She lived in a Cambridge hotel while they were building her house, which was right on the river there, and it was to her specifications. She was only like not even 5 feet tall. She was real a small woman. So the counter space was but it had trophies, shelves in there or whatever. But she got along a lot with the Cambridge people. She would walk through town, and she and Frank Butler, her husband, and so they spent about 3 years in this area here. And they used to have a balcony on this house. And they used to shoot ducks and everything like that. So. Yeah, and I'm working on the thing. Amelia Earhart coming over. Said we mentioned that earlier. She landed at the Hebron Airport. Hebron used to have an airport which lasted 1 year. It was right
so I don't know if it was Hebron or if it was the old the Bennett Field that's out there, or where was she?
I think it was Hebron.
Okay.
Okay, and it was right off Route 50.
Right.
I've got a picture of it looking down from an airplane.
Right.
It lasted only 1 year or something like that. She landed in Amelia Earhart. She was another star. Landed in Salisbury, and she motorcaded to Salisbury at the Wycomico Hotel again.
Right.
It was raining cats and dogs that day. I think it was 1928. Kids were out of high school to see Amelia Earhart, and she spoke at the Wycomico Hotel. So then she flew out or whatever.
That's amazing. So. All media has changed. Newspapers, certainly television, radio. Will there ever be a golden age again of disc jockeys? I mean, or is that gone?
Well, I don't know.
Or does it go on now and I can't connect to it? I mean, do my kids listen to disc jockeys and I don't realize it?
I don't know why. People listen for different reasons. I listen. I listen to Mike Bradley on 92.7 WGMD radio and some of the other people. But, there'll always be, I think, a radio announcer that people want to listen to for information or whatever. Everybody said, when the satellite radio would come out, oh, that's the death knell of radio. But it hasn't been. Radio's still doing very well. People still have 3 or so radios in their home, and but there's always going to be that special person when you turn on the dial that you want to listen to. So I remember, we talked about WSMD, the first station in Salisbury. Gosh, I remember, and I'm sure you the little transistors.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't have all the radio stations. I remember in Delmar as a kid laying in bed with a little transistor listening to, WLS Chicago, Dick Biondi Show, WKBW Buffalo, Joey Reynolds, and all these great radio stations you could bring in on your little transistor.
Station in Pittsburgh, we listen to that one all the time.
That's right.
I want to say CAU, but
KDKA.
KDKA, right.
First commercial radio station.
Right. And the one in Baltimore,
WCAO.
Baltimore. We could all hear that. It's like 530, 560. It was down there.
And Johnny Dark. Johnny Dark, just last week, was inducted into the Maryland, Delaware Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Maryland, Delaware, D.C. Hall of Fame. And he was one of the great voices. And I think when the Beatles came to Baltimore in 60-something, he introduced them or whatever. But, it's interesting. So.
Amazing. He's Wayne Cannon from my youth. He's love these guys. Miss all this stuff, this radio stuff. Really, really do. Wayne, thanks for coming today. I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right.
Greg Bassett, Salisbury Independent. Another great edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.